we go.
And I'll be off camera, right, Nick?
Yep, that's
Okay.
fine. I will
Right.
too, until we get to the Q&A.
I won't look at the chat too much, Deborah, but if you want to let me know something, feel free to try to chat me or even text me if there's something really important I'm missing.
Okay, will do.
Welcome in, everybody. I'm seeing lots of folks piling in. We'll give it about a minute or two before we start the conversation. But while we wait, if you wouldn't mind putting your name and where you're calling in from, that would be great so that we can get the conversation started. Oh boy, more names than I can count already coming in. Great. I see some familiar faces in here. We've got Keith Hudson, Susanna Cabrera, Kate Wilson, Tom Pacchiaretti. Hi, Tom. Oh man, too many people to count.
Yeah.
We've got Jamie from Cleveland, Isabel calling in from the UK. Hi,
Isabella.
Isabella, yes, thank you. Frank, hi, how you doing, Frank? I hope you're doing well. Kim
Is that Frank Hamilton?
Sure is.
Our Florida friends are all piling in
Florida
here.
friends, exactly.
And by the way, Susanna Cabrera is an Ice House entrepreneur. She's one of the entrepreneurs featured in the Ice House program. I just had dinner with her and her husband last week in LA. She built like an amazing company, built it, came up with the idea, built it and sold it all as a side hustle while she was an executive at
Really
SAP.
story,
Yeah.
Nahamani, it's great to have you with us. I miss chatting with you. That's awesome. We've got Eileen. I'm sure I've missed folks.
Birgit from Austria.
Fantastic. Wow. Some folks joining us in their evening times. That's exciting. Well, okay. We've got kind of a quorum going here. So let me just run through some brief housekeeping notes and then I'll let Gary and Jen take it away. But thank you all for joining us.
Hold on. We got Alok from India, Lamaya from Spain. This is great. All right. We got some global audience going here. I love it. I love it.
Global audience. Fantastic. Yeah. So as you probably heard when you joined, we are recording today's session. And within about 24 hours of the session ending, I'll be sending the recording out to everyone, as well as a whole host of other helpful links as well. And Deborah, to that point, if there's anything you'd like me to include in that follow-up email, let's make sure we get that all sorted out. I've got the transcript going as well, so I'll make sure to include that in the YouTube recording. And you all will have a chance to have your voices heard. I will read out any comments, questions, concerns that you have. So please put those in the chat throughout the conversation. We're going to give Gary and Jen about a half hour, 40 minutes of uninterrupted convo, and then I'll hop in and bring in the voice of the audience. So
you'll have to intervene on this one, Nick.
Oh yes, I before we hit live, they were already in a great conversation. So I'm hoping we can keep that going here. So without further ado, Gary, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Deb. And thank you, Jen, for joining us. Thank you, everyone. I saw we just have somebody, Hussein from Saudi Arabia. Welcome, man. This is awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Schoeniger. I'm the founder and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. This is a part of a semi-regular webinar series we do about the entrepreneurial mindset. And today, I'm really excited to have Dr. Jennifer Hall with us, who is the co-founder, I'm not sure if I have that right. Jen?
Co-author.
Co-author. Okay, that's right. I did read that.
I wish I could be a founder. That sounds better. I want to be a founder.
Well, you kind of are, but
Okay.
the of a really important tool called the Entrepreneurial Mindset Profile, which is a psychometric tool to measure the entrepreneurial mindset. We're going to dig into that in a minute. But Jen, I just want to say welcome to the webinar and ask you, like, how did you get mixed up in all this? Where's your interest in measuring the entrepreneurial mindset come from?
Thank you, Gary. So nice to be here. And thank you, Nick. Delighted to be here and to see so many familiar names checking in the chat. So I am by training a clinical psychologist. And right after grad school, I took a faculty position at Eckerd College in St. Pete, Florida. And a few years into college teaching, I got involved with the Leadership Development Institute, which is a network associate of the Center for Creative Leadership, or CCL, which is known around the world for its leadership research and training. And I started to do a little bit of coaching in that program. And 5 years into my faculty position, I decided to quit and go over full-time to the Leadership Development Institute to start an executive coaching program. At the time, we were providing development experiences to executives within the course of a 5-day program, but there was no follow-up, right? And we all know that spaced learning is more effective than massed learning. So that was 99. So that's just when coaching was really starting to take off. So I feel very fortunate I fell into it early in my career because I absolutely love it. All of the work that we did and that we still do and that the Center for Creative Leadership does is assessment based. So it comes from a tradition of saying, okay, well, let's assess personality characteristics, skill sets. Let's do 360-degree feedback on our executive clients so they have a good idea of what is their starting point, where are they strong, where are they less strong, how are they impacting people, and what are their implications for moving forward in their leadership career. And so it was about 2012, I think, one of our coaches called me and she asked if I knew of an assessment of entrepreneurial leadership or entrepreneurial strengths, because she thought it was very important for our clients, even though very few of our clients were actual entrepreneurs. They were corporate leaders. But this turned out to be one of the co-authors of the assessment, Dr. Pam Mayer. And she said, this is really important. And if we think our clients, these organizational leaders, need to operate in some ways like entrepreneurs, we should be measuring it. And I said, you're right, we should. She asked me if I knew of any tools. I didn't, she didn't. So we roped in our colleague, Dr. Mark Davis, who's a social psychologist. Pam is also a psychologist, but Mark is the real expert, more so than Pam and myself, on psychometrics. And we decided to create one. That's how I got mixed up.
Yeah, that's really cool. The need for that, I think the need for entrepreneurial thinking at the leadership level in organizations has never been greater than it is right now. But my fear is, Jen, that like it's still not well understood. And people tend to default to trait-based assumptions about the causes of entrepreneurial behavior. It's like, and I'm sure you've looked at the literature here. People have been trying to associate entrepreneurial tendencies to traits, and the outcomes are the correlation seems pretty weak. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so I think that the way we look at it is everything that we wanted to do was about helping people to develop, right? And when we looked at the literature at the time, it looked like there were some correlations with what we would call personality characteristics, or you might call traits, and there are some correlations with skills. And so in the EMP, we assess both, right? And the way I look at the results is that whether you are someone who loves structure or hates structure, whether you are someone who naturally can feel passionate about their work, that might, now let's take that one away, because actually now I see that in a whole separate category than skills and personality. But let's say the degree to which you like or dislike structure, the degree to which you like bouncing your ideas off of other people and feeling that support, the extent to which you can operate comfortably in a hierarchy. We think those are a little bit more trait-based, but it doesn't mean you can't develop them. But more important, we think it has implications for fit. So as you know, you can be entrepreneurial on your own, right? As a solopreneur, you can be entrepreneurial as the head of a big company, or
right.
You can be entrepreneurial within, let's say, a franchise, right? Where all the structure comes to you from another larger organization. So when we look at things like structure and independence and nonconformity, what we call the personality traits or the personality scales, we think those have more implications for fit, but the 7 skills scales have more implication for where do you need to develop, or who do you need to help you with something based on what gives them energy and what energizes and excites them. So yes and no, I guess it's a kind of a more nuanced response. So I think there's something about the traits, but I think it does not put a cap on what someone can do in terms of entrepreneurial mindset. I think it's more about the how they do it, Gary.
Yeah. I like that, Jen. And in my new book, I coined this term entrepreneurials. It's kind of a tongue in cheek on millennials, because I think we need to take the entrepreneurial conversation beyond this binary way of thinking that you're either an entrepreneur or you're an employee.
Absolutely.
And I think people at all levels of an organization need both, like a managerial mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, it's all context-based, right?
It's all context-based. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. It's all context. That's why so many entrepreneurs, I think, come from adverse backgrounds because the system is not working for them.
Yes. The school system is not set up for people who tend to function like entrepreneurs. It's just not.
Right. But I think, the real benefit in our work, your work and ours, Jen, I think if I'm understanding you properly, like we're both operating on the assumption that there is entrepreneurial potential in your organization. It's there. And we talked about this a little bit before we went live. Like the entrepreneurial spirit is the human spirit. Not everyone wants to start a business, but we all have the desire to contribute. We all have the desire for autonomy. We all have the desire to be recognized for our contribution. Those things are innate.
Yes.
And I think, organizations could do a lot, could help themselves a lot to recognize this. Right? And I don't know, I'd love to get your take on this, Jen, but the way I think about this is that the attitudes and skills required to discover an opportunity are distinct from those required to exploit that opportunity.
I've heard you say this before, Gary, and I could not agree more. And I was just having a conversation with a coaching client this morning, and he was talking about, and hopefully whether he's watching this or not is fine, but he was talking about the CEO role in his organization, which is open, and he was applying for it, but he talked to the person who was going to fill it. And they were trying to decide who is best for this opportunity now, right? The person who's going to go out there and develop a lot of business, or the person who's going to exploit the existing business, right?
Right.
You're looking at those two different profiles, those two different kinds of mindsets. Again, it's all contextual. Where is the business right now? What does it need right now? And which skill set and which mindset is going to be most appropriate? But I think the best leaders and probably the best entrepreneurs are versatile, right? So there might be times when they have to use a managerial mindset or approach, and times when they have to use an entrepreneurial mindset. And so awareness of that allows people to make intentional decisions.
Well, to just piggyback on that, Jen, I've suffered mightily in my entrepreneurial journey because I struggled to develop a managerial mindset. And I see a lot of other entrepreneurs doing that. We love the idea creation, or I like the idea creation in that. And at some point you have to kind of tamp that down, and you got to replicate. You got to go into managerial mode, and you got to replicate the useful thing that you discovered.
Right.
So
or
that you can
hire
grow.
People around you who enjoy doing that.
Correct, which is what I did. Is what I did.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings me to another question, Jen. Like, do we find people that are more inclined to be entrepreneurial? Because I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of contradicting myself, I guess. I mean, I don't see the trait. The literature doesn't really make a strong case for trait-based assumptions, and then it gets even more, complicated when you just try to define entrepreneur.
Sure.
You know, are you talking about Elon Musk? Are you talking about a small business owner?
Exactly. That's
Are you talking
right.
about a farmer? You know, those are small business owners. I mean, what traits do you need to be a farmer? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And I work with a lot of new coaches, right? And a lot of them are going out on their own. Many of them have had corporate careers for a while, and then they decide they want to be coaches. Are they entrepreneurs? Have they thought of themselves as entrepreneurs? No. But that's one of the benefits of using a tool like the EMP is, okay, well, so you haven't defined yourself that way because you might have been defining it as someone like Elon Musk, right?
Yeah,
Because we come
right.
in with all these presuppositions about what it takes and who they are and what they're like and what their background is. And you know better than anyone that those are often incorrect, right? Your Ice House book really addresses that myth or those myths head on. But then when they take the EMP, they can see, oh, well, you know what, I hadn't thought about the fact that I am really good at execution and I'm really action oriented. I'm willing to take some risks. I'm very achievement focused. Oh, I can leverage those. I can translate those into a successful business as I define it without being super visionary or being the one who has all the ideas or not being able to work with people. And that's why I like the kind of multivariate approach to it, because everybody has, to your point, we all have that entrepreneurial spirit, but it gets repressed in a lot of us based on our upbringing, based on the school system, based on our first organizational opportunities, based on where we come from, right? But then I think being able to identify the ways in which someone is entrepreneurial helps a lot.
Yeah. You know, I continue to be amazed at you know, the untapped entrepreneurial potential in people, as you said, Jen, that don't even self-identify, would never think of themselves. I have a friend who's a retired FBI agent, and he now works in like healthcare fraud in DC.
Nice, yeah.
And we were hanging out a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, and you know, he was just perplexed, like, why doesn't everybody like look for problems in their day-to-day work and try to improve things? And I said, well, Jerry, first of all, like, you're an FBI agent. Like, you spent your whole life looking at things and problem solving. So that's now natural to you. And so, you know, we talked about this, and I told him, well, Jerry, why don't you just try to go back to your work and like take your team and ask them to shut off their email at 2:00 on a Friday afternoon and just start to like talk to people about what problems are you seeing in your work and what do you think needs to be improved and how can we do that?
Yes.
And he sent me a text last week and he was just like, oh my, you know, OMG. You know, it's just amazing when you just sort of create these conditions.
Right.
You'll see that desire to contribute's there, but it's being stifled.
Right. I agree. And we don't even know what's happening. So people are perpetuating the systems and the processes that they grew up with, if you will, thinking, oh, it's about efficiency and metrics and all that kind of stuff.
Well, so okay, so yeah, there you hit it, Jen. There you hit it. That you know, so the way I think about it like this, like, let's talk about a paradigm for a second. Like a manager, my understanding of mindset just lurched forward by leaps and bounds by reading Edgar Schein's work in his study of culture, organizational culture. And what I came to believe, Jen, is that mindset is to a person what culture is to a group.
Love it.
So, and you can read Schein's work and scratch out the word culture and insert the word mindset, and it works perfectly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what he's saying is that we can't really understand someone else's mindset. We can't understand the entrepreneurial mindset until we recognize that we have a managerial mindset. Right. So
yeah. Or what would it be fair to say we can't recognize the value of an entrepreneurial mindset until we recognize our
I think that's fair to say.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where I was going. Like, you know, the entrepreneur only seems enigmatic or mysterious to the extent that we are steeped in managerial culture.
Right. And probably disruptive and,
Annoying.
negative. Yeah. Add all kinds of negative adjectives.
Yeah. And so the way I think about this is, managerial paradigms are really, really important
Mhm.
for the efficient replication and distribution of useful things.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so they're based on linearity and efficiency.
Yes.
They tend to be error reducing
Yes.
environments.
Right.
And we need that. But those environments tend to be intolerant of experimentation and exploration and those kinds of things. And I think what leaders need to understand is we need both. And we need to create space where it's okay for people to break out a little bit of time to experiment in the margins.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I'm reminded of the work of Vijay Govindaranjan, right, who wrote the Innovation Wars and HBR many years ago, about the fact that, organizations say they want innovation and they want people to behave like entrepreneurs, but they subject the innovation efforts to the same expectations of bottom line profits and quarter over quarter profitability. And he said, you really need to separate that out and say there are different rules over here, right?
Yeah.
Just fund it for a while without the same expectation of profit and that kind of thing. So oftentimes organizations are not structured well to get the kinds of results they say that they want.
Yeah. And the part of that that's further complicated is like good ideas almost always start out as bad ideas.
Mhm.
Right. And they iterate and it takes sometimes years, sometimes decades for the true gem to fall out of the experimentation. And that's just, in an environment that's focused on productivity, you can see where they would be intolerant to that. I had a friend that was the founder of a company called Steris. Last time I checked, they were like 3 billion in market cap. They're a sterilization company. And he got fired. Like he was working for the largest sterilization company in the world. And when he came up with that idea, they fired him.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not surprised. And over the course of an organization's evolution, different kinds of paradigms are needed as well, right? So I was just spending some time with a startup, a high growth tech startup. The co-founders are still there. They're incredibly visionary. They brought in all these other fabulous people, right? And now all of a sudden there's a huge demand for their products. And at the same time, they're trying to deliver these products error-free. They've got to innovate all these other products. And, there are challenges with that. So now they're working with outside consulting companies, which are helping them implement all of these managerial systems to reduce the errors, increase efficiency, all that. But they're trying not to lose their innovation and their entrepreneurial spirit as well. So those are very real tensions. Yeah.
So how does EMP help in a situation like that?
Well, an EMP, what I like to do with an EMP in a team, Gary, is to have the entire team take the EMP, not look at their individual results, so that doesn't prejudice them, and then just really objectively look at the 14 dimensions that are measured and ask themselves, at this point of time, in this team, in this organization, in this market, with all the contextual factors, what behaviors are most important for us as an executive team to be demonstrating? Whether they're natural for us or not, we don't care, right? Which 4 out of these 14 represent the behaviors most important to our success right now? And that question in and of itself leads to really rich conversations, right? And sometimes you unearth assumptions and differences, and it leads to a good conversation. But then once the team essentially figures out the 4 dimensions that are most important, you can compare it to the actual team score and say, well, how are we aligned with this, right? If we say we need to be passionate, action-oriented, persistent, and have good ideas, well, we're high on 2 out of 4 of those, great. What about the 2 we're relatively low on? Do we have people on the team who can contribute that? Have we been engaging in groupthink, so we haven't been bringing that forward or even allowing that to come out? So that's an example of a way we would use that in an executive team or any team.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to hear, like, what are those 14? I mean, that's a long list, but if you could talk about some of those, that would be great. But before you do that, the thing that's interesting to me also, Jen, is the, you know, the person and the situation. I'm a half-ass student of social psychology, and we know that, you know, you know, a bad system will beat a good person every time. So, is there, you know, anything in EMP that helps people understand the ways in which the organizational culture might be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, inhibiting
them.
yeah, either inhibiting or enhancing the development of those skills.
So here's what I would say is you're not going to see that directly in the report, but through a conversation with a certified practitioner, we're going to get to exactly that. And so I'll just give you a quick example. I worked with someone very early on who came through a leadership program at Eckerd Leadership Development Institute. We had just developed the EMP. We weren't giving it as part of that program, but the more he spoke, the more I heard this frustrated entrepreneur, or what I would call an intrapreneur, like an entrepreneur inside, right? As Alex Noble would say, in his new book. And I just sensed this frustration, and I gave him the EMP right then and there. And as we looked at his scores, and as we talked more about his relationship with his boss, the person's situation, I won't say fit, the person's situation disconnect became so clear. So he was really high on idea generation and passion, but really low on execution and risk acceptance. And his boss had literally said to him at one point, "Can you just please get one thing done at a time?" Right? His boss was probably functioning in a very, very different way, different skill sets, different values. And as a result, he saw this incredibly exuberant, energetic, entrepreneurial young man as a wild card, someone he couldn't count on to execute and meet deadlines. And as a result, they were probably both feeling frustrated. Well, it turned out that his boss's boss was the one who sent him to this program in the first place, saw tremendous potential in him. And once he recognized that, like, I'm not broken, it's just I'm not a good fit for this position and for this boss in particular, right? He's able to go back to his organization with a much greater sense of confidence in his own abilities and his own drive. And then his boss's boss kind of handpicked him to be in this innovation committee or initiative. And once he found a better fit, even within the same organization, he really blossomed. And I've been following him on LinkedIn ever since. He's been continuing to grow and develop in his career. And he's really
That's a great story. That's a great story.
Through a conversation with a certified experienced practitioner, those are exactly the kinds of issues we can identify and remedy.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, I love that quote from Deming. I think I put it in my new book. Every system is perfectly designed to get the outcomes it creates, right?
That one. Yes.
But I sort of took that and ran with it. I stole it. I think Deming stole it from somebody else, but
probably
every poet is a thief.
Yeah.
The idea is that a mindset is a belief system that is perfectly designed to create the outcomes it creates.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Very well said.
Yeah. So, Jen, talk to us about the 14 EMP scales. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. And I can see Deborah just posted it in the chat. Thank you so much, Deborah. I feel like I want to introduce Deborah, even though she's not on camera right now. But Deborah Conrad, for those who don't know her, is the heart and soul of the EMP. She is the director of the product in that business, and she knows everything, and she's there every day.
She knows everything. I love
she does. She knows everything EMP, more so than I do. But I don't want to necessarily bore everybody just with definitions of the scales, but let me just say that for the personality scales, we've got 7, and there is something I do want to say. So independence, which is about the desire to work with a high degree of independence, and a lot of people end up getting low scores on this, and they get concerned because they see themselves as independent thinkers. It's not really what we mean. What we mean by independence is, so the higher someone is on the scale, the less they value having input or consulting with others about their work, and the more they're likely to chafe at direction from people who are in a hierarchy, right, from bosses. So you can be very independently minded, but still really value working in a team and being okay with direction, and you'll get a lower score on this. Preference for limited structure is another one. Entrepreneurs tend to reject structure to a greater degree. And maybe I can pause here if it's okay, Gary, and you can stop me if it's not, but to just explain how we came up with these 14, I think it's important. So we didn't start, like you started with a theory, and I love your theory and the framework about entrepreneurial mindset. We didn't start with a theory. We just said, well, let's look at all the ways in which a group of actual business owners, entrepreneurs, very heterogeneous, not all Elon Musks, not all farmers, right? Anyone who owned a business, entrepreneurs versus corporate or organizational leaders. And let's see the ways in which they differ. And so we created psychometrically sound, very short measures of each of a number of dimensions that, based on the literature and our conversations with thought leaders, we thought might distinguish the two groups. And any scale that did, in fact, significantly distinguish between those two groups, where one group scored significantly higher than another from a statistical point of view, we included it in the scale. So we're not coming at this as a theory. We're not saying, oh, entrepreneurs need to have these 14, they need to be different on these 14 scales, or even different on these 7 out of the 14. What we're saying is, because entrepreneurs are higher than organizational leaders on these 14 scales, let's look to see where you individual or you executive team, right, or you co-founders are high and low, and we look at those as strengths in entrepreneurial thought and action. So we're not directly measuring mindset at all. Okay, we're measuring ways in which people describe themselves and seeing where those are more and less similar to actual entrepreneurs or actual organizational leaders. So this might be heretical for me to say, but if I had to name it again, I might call it the Entrepreneurial Strengths Index.
Yeah.
We're not measuring directly mindset. We're just collecting.
I love that, Jen. I love that.
Does that fit for you, Gary?
It does. It does. It's the entrepreneurial like strengths finder,
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Man, that's really good. That's really good. And what I think there are some people that just like are allergic to entrepreneurial activity, and I think that's okay. In my new book, I sort of framed the managerial mindset as the other side of the coin of the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
What I'm essentially saying is that the world has changed in ways that we now need both.
Right.
We need to be able to have the cognitive dexterity to toggle,
Yes.
to know which situation we're in, so we know which mindset to apply. If you only have one, a hammer in your toolbox, like you're not going to be able to go that far. But I think it's, there's nothing inherently wrong with a non-entrepreneurial mindset.
Nothing inherently wrong if it meets the context. So I usually tell this story with this example with limited structure. Like, some people love structure. Could we teach them to not love it? Well, we could maybe teach them to tolerate being without it for a while, but then they would immediately implement it. And I think of my dad, who turned 87 yesterday, and he's a Ph.D. in mechanical engineering, and he is the most structured person I know. So early on, when we were developing the EMP, I gave him an early version, and he said, well, I know why you're doing that. You're doing that to set the lowest possible level, right? And it's true. There's nothing entrepreneurial about him. He would hate to do something outside of the structure. It doesn't mean that he doesn't think of creative ideas within his job, right? But he's not going to be doing anything that we would call entrepreneurial, probably. But I think it's all about versatility.
Yeah. But I would hazard a guess that if you put your dad in a situation, some sort of a challenging, dire situation where there were no rules, and that he would get very creative very quickly. And
he would document his entire process, right? So it could be replicated. Exactly. He would have to be, but he would be outside of his comfort zone, and he would go back to creating comfort for himself within that situation.
Well, that's also really interesting because, Jen, I think, our brains seek to automate everything in order to reduce the cognitive load, right? So once we learn something and we assume it to be the correct way to perceive, think, act, feel in relation to a problem, we relegate that schema to habitual control. That's a natural process. We're always sort of inclined towards doing that.
For survival, because there are too many stimuli for us to examine with openness and wonder.
Correct. You couldn't get through life if you have to like figure out what a pair of pants is every morning. Right. But the way I think about it, so from an evolutionary perspective, a mindset, which enables us to think without thinking. Right. And so when you want the future to look to resemble the past, our mindset is an evolutionary feature.
Yep.
But in the face of change, our mindset becomes an evolutionary bug.
Yeah. Global change, national change, individual change, right? So when I'm coaching an individual, that's a great way to look at it. Your mindset has served you well to this point in some ways. Is it now to look at it?
Yeah. There's a great quote from Jared Diamond's book, Collapse, How Societies Choose to Succeed or Fail. And you could scratch out societies and put organizations, institutions, whatever.
Individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And he said that the values to which we cling most stubbornly under inappropriate conditions, i.e. the face of change, are those values which were once the source of our greatest triumph.
Yes.
Like nothing fails like success. That's the mindset dilemma, so to speak.
Love it. Is that the name of your book or the next book? The mindset dilemma.
I kind of like that, Jen.
Maybe I should like it.
Yeah, I think that is a good title.
I've been
struggling. What's that?
Can I write the foreword?
Yes. The mindset dilemma. Well, it's sort of an homage to Clayton Christensen, but I know we're going to keep talking endlessly if Nick doesn't intervene here. Right. We're totally geeking out. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, Jen, is, so I think we're saying the same thing here. Like what I'm saying in my new book is that, entrepreneurial people possess the attitudes and skills the world now demands. Like the managerial mindset is no longer sufficient. I'm not saying throw out the managerial mindset. I'm now saying we need them both.
Yeah. Well,
right.
We've always needed them both, right? But now it's kind of like
I would argue that, the industrial revolution kind of taught us it was all about replication. And so if you think about the way schools function, there's no discovery.
I know.
It's all delivery. It's the memorization of known facts. And the underlying values and assumptions are that you're going to work in an established organization. Someone else has figured out what is useful, and you're going to fulfill a predetermined role in that organization.
I'm so glad that's changing, thanks to thought leaders like you and others. And it's so not helpful.
It's not helpful, but again, it's sort of the self-serving bias because these assumptions become so deeply embedded.
Yes.
It's lost on us the ways in which we're actually systematically inhibiting that school is systematically inhibiting the development of entrepreneurial attitudes and skills.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that happened to me until age, 40, 45, right? Like, school worked well for me. No one in my family was entrepreneurial at all. Let me get this job and have it for life. And then when I'm examining my behavior, it's like, I keep doing new things every few years and kind of doing things.
Last thing I'll say about that.
Nick is dying to jump in.
3 weeks ago, we were in South Africa training TVET teachers, which are like career and technical education. We did 200 TVET teachers. And it's kind of like in South Africa, it's like Europe, where after 9th grade, 10, 11, and 12, you're in a TVET college, and then you have an apprenticeship and like 2 years of a community college-y type experience. And all these TVET teachers we're talking about was unemployment. There's 60% youth unemployment in South Africa.
Oh my God.
And the foundation that brought us in then asked me every evening to go interview 4 entrepreneurs. They brought him in. I went off in this little room in this, in this resort complex and interviewed 4 South African entrepreneurs every night. And they all said the same thing. The opportunities are everywhere. If this thing doesn't work out, I'll have another one like in the next week.
Yes.
And it was so striking, Jen. Like, are you guys living in the same universe?
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's
That's the mindset. That's the
it's
entrepreneurial mindset. And
yeah.
if you even name it or encourage it in children, how should those who don't kind of come by it really, really naturally know to start thinking that way?
Correct. So Nick, okay, I'm going to shut up and see what questions you have here.
No, this has been great. This has been great. So I'm going to combine a comment from Susanna Cabrera with a question from Nahamani, because I see them as kind of interrelated, and maybe we can get into a little more specifics about tools and tactics. So Susanna mentioned that specifically in the corporate world, it's very important to note that the conditions for what we're talking about we need to acknowledge the situation, as Gary would put it. So she said, I will add, in the corporate world, that the conditions need to be developed to enable it so that entrepreneurship can flourish. In agreement with that, I'm wondering if the two of you could talk about tools and tactics that you've seen used to help people on an individual. And Jen, you could also probably speak very well to the group dynamic. So some more specifics about how are you leveraging using an EMP for a group? What are some other tools that you've seen be useful? And Gary, maybe we can talk a little bit about how our entrepreneurial mindset training fits into that as well.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You want
Well,
to
I think the example I gave about the group is typically how I use the EMP is
Mhm.
to identify where do you need to be entrepreneurial, and at the same time, so we'll not only look at the individual behaviors, we'll look at the group level behaviors, but we'll also look at the organizational obstacles, just in a very explicit way, to having a conversation, like what's getting in the way. If you guys are generating great ideas, or if you love to generate great ideas, what happens next? What's getting in the way? What do we have the power to change? So I think it's starting with the data and having a conversation about how the things that we measure at the individual and the group level interact with the organizational context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I'm currently consulting for a college out near LA, a community college, the leadership level. And what we found is that people are making decisions based on the limits of their domain, these deans and leaders at the college level, that they're making decisions within the scope of their area of influence, let's say, without understanding how the whole system works.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, but the president has given these folks permission. Look, and I want to go back to that, Nick. I want to go back to something, a quote from Ronald Heifetz from the Harvard Graduate School. Like, the greatest failure of leadership is to treat an adaptive challenge as if it were a technical problem.
Mm-hmm.
And technical problems can be solved with managerial thinking. You can hire an expert. It's quantitative. You can order by fiat. You can implement by fiat. You can just make this a mandate and people have to abide by it. But with adaptive challenges, you need an entrepreneurial mindset, and you have to use empathy mapping, and you have to go out into the organizations and reach beyond the scope of your own domain to understand how the system works. If that makes any sense. And to go back to Susanna's, and by the way, she created, it's like the innovation network or an innovation initiative at SAP, like, that survived her by more than 10 years. It's kind of still going on. She's somebody you definitely should know, Jen. Yeah. And also she worked at the high, pretty high up in Cisco. But the other thing is, more broadly speaking, the answer to Susanna's question is psychological safety is like number one. Like, people need to, like, autonomy and psychological safety, like, are the two core ingredients. And too often leaders say, yeah, we want you to come up with ideas, but what's really happening is you're being punished for doing so.
Yep.
And ultimately, what I want to say to answer this question, to bring some clarity to this, in our model, what we're saying, Jen, whether I'm talking to an individual, to an organizational leader, like you have to preserve the core. Let's use Jim Collins' model. Preserve the core of what you're doing. Don't quit your day job. Don't drop out of school. Don't go mortgage your house.
Yeah.
Use, 5% of your discretionary time and thought and effort around the margins and explore new ways to make yourself more useful to more humans.
Love that. Yeah.
That's our model. It's not about disruption for disruption's sake. It's like the main function has to keep going, but we have to give people permission in the margins to explore and to experiment. And you can't predict, or it's very difficult to predict, who is going to come up with something worthwhile, or which idea will even, emerge. So anyway, that's probably too long of an answer.
Yeah, I loved every word. How to make yourself more useful to more humans. I heard something recently, I'm not sure, it must have been on a podcast, but it said that so often our intuition is wrong and we think that.
About half the time, according to Kahneman.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
We need to thinking fast and slow. It's been on my list for 10 years. But someone said, oh, we're always talking about self-care now and doing nice, indulgent things for ourselves. But the research shows that if we actually go help someone else, we feel much better, right? So that's
we talked about that, I think, before we went live. I mean, that's the secret sauce to an entrepreneur. I heard this definition the other day of like passion and purpose as a difference, that passion is inwardly focused. You like to do this, great, and that's fine. Purpose is pro-social. It's externally focused.
Yeah.
I think, Jen, the secret sauce, the secret that I learned from Uncle Cleve is you get what you want by helping other people get what they want. That's how you tap into the most potent form of human motivation. That's really the secret to the whole thing.
I can't follow that, Gary. I'm not going to try. No, I mean, it's just
all right.
so
Closing up now.
It really is profound.
What else you got, Nick?
Yeah. No, it's a busy chat, so I'm trying to find ones that are good encapsulations. So Nanette asked an interesting question that I think both of you could speak to. Deborah and I both kind of mentioned some answers, but I wanted to get your takes on it as well about if there's any training around both EMP, Eli's work, or just generally that applies to students and grads, because a lot of times we're talking about folks already in the workforce. A lot of this conversation has been, how do you retool yourself? Before we went live, we were talking about the need for a second act for a lot of folks who have, as Gary and I will talk about in our trainings during the transformation theory concept, if you're going into obsolescence, this is a time where people need that kind of second act. So could you guys talk about the work that both of our organizations have done for younger audiences or people who are still students?
Yeah, can I start with that one, Jen? And it just kind of it seems, and I'll hand it off to you. But our work at ELI is focused on just that. We have entrepreneurial mindset education, training, and professional development programs. The core of what we do is we train people how to cultivate entrepreneurial thinking in others, be they your students, your workforce, people in your communities, workforce development, that kind of thing. That's what we do. And Jen, I'm just going to hand that off to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gary. And I think Deborah responded that I think you said, half of the EMP certified practitioners operate in higher education. So we don't have open enrollment programs for students where any student who wants to from anywhere in the world can get into a program. It's kind of dependent right now on whether they go to an institution where there's a certified practitioner. And I joke as my kids are approaching college age that I'm only sending them to college for their certified EMP practitioners. Like, you will take the EMP and think I'm cool at some point, but
yeah, that's great.
So the EMP is used with college students more than any other group, even though that's not originally what we had. imagined. To Gary's point about, you don't know what's gonna, once you
Yeah.
create a product or a service, you don't really know what's gonna happen to it, even if you've done a lot of research.
Exactly. Exactly.
And Nick, I want to just tag on something Mark Siegel said in the comments here. He said, thinking in possibilities, not impossible.
Mm.
Mhm.
And Jen, I'd love to get your take on this, but I've begun to notice, you know, in people's language, you can sort of discern the mindset. Are they driven by the past or are they tapping into the future?
Yeah.
And I hear people, you know, when you're talking to people about big idea or just new ideas about problem solving, and people that start talking up, they're the yeah buts, the yeah but. It's like, it's not that these people are like necessarily negative or trying to squelch your idea. They're just drawing from the past, and they're saying there's no precedent in my memory
Yes.
for what you're saying.
Right. Right.
And what the entrepreneur is doing is they're saying, like, what if, what
Exactly.
could be?
Right.
But cognitively, this is what Seligman's newest work is about. Like, it allows us to break from the past.
Mhm.
And I think, and Jen, you're the psychologist here, but I think what entrepreneurs do without realizing they're doing it is they're able to tap into that imagination, the what if.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's not one or the other, but it's one is more dominant. Then you still need to draw from the past to figure stuff out.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in coaching, if I'm working with someone who is a yeah butter, right?
Mhm.
Some of the questions that I ask are designed to get them to think in a different way, with what I would call a mindset of curiosity as opposed to a mindset of judgment. Not that, and I'm not using judgment here as in judgmental, but it is more efficient and it is helpful. So you don't have to wonder what pants are every morning if we make up our minds about how things are and how they're going to be, and we can take a position. It's easier and it requires less cognitive load, but it also cuts off all kinds of possibilities. So I would invite someone in coaching to say, well, how would you know if that weren't true?
Right.
Whatever they're saying, how would you know if something were possible? To get them to examine their assumptions and their biases that are based on the past, and so think more openly into the future. Yeah. So again,
Yeah,
talk at individual and collective levels about how this works.
Right. But, you know, Jen, I think, you know, if I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and almost invariably, they'll start to articulate some sort of a compelling goal.
Mm.
And, but, you know, to be compelled means to be irresistibly drawn.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's something on the future they're striving towards. And it's that positive future orientation
Mhm.
that enables them to tap into unprecedented problem-solving capabilities. It's not even obvious to them,
Mhm. right?
I think, you know, I'm sure you've looked at Deci and Ryan's work, right? The self-determination theory.
Mhm. Not for
That
many
with,
years.
but the basic idea is the core ingredients for human flourishing are autonomy, competency, and relatedness.
Yes. Yes.
And I think entrepreneurs unwittingly stumble into that trifecta.
Oh, neat. Say more about that, Gary.
Well, I mean, you know, the Deci and Ryan's idea is that these are essential nutrients, like that we're all the basic idea nested in Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory is that humans are just like every other living thing in that we have within us both the desire and the capacity to become all that we can become.
Yeah.
We're all acorns with the capacity to become a mighty oak tree. But we need psychological nutrients.
Mhm.
You know, Dan Pink kind of took their work and dumbed it down a little bit, called it autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Mhm.
Works well enough, right?
Yeah.
We need to have control over our day-to-day lives. We need to feel like we have competence, the ability to navigate life and face the challenges of life. And we need to feel that we matter, that we belong.
Mhm.
That we're part of something and we're contributing to something. Most of, and what Deci and Ryan are very clear about, Take away one of those three and it's off. Suboptimal experience will ensue. But if those three nutrients are attainable, the individual will experience lifelong growth, social integration, and psychological well-being. The entrepreneur is like Mr. Magoo, just stumbling into that. Most people don't even know who the hell Mr. Magoo was, the cartoon
Dating
character.
ourselves again, Gary.
I know, I'm sorry. But the entrepreneur just stumbles into that. There's the autonomous pursuit of something that's meaningful. You're solving a problem for other people. And what people overlook, Jen, is when someone agrees to pay you for something, it's a validation of who you are. It's saying to you, I also learned this from Marx, by the way. I learned more about entrepreneurship from Karl Marx than probably any other source about the entrepreneurial spirit. It's just so counterintuitive. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the desire to fulfill human needs is an essential part of our nature. And the entrepreneur stumbles into that trifecta, and by doing so, they become optimally engaged. But to the casual observer, it looks like some sort of a dispositional thing. Oh, Jennifer's just passionate. She's just driven. She's just this way. And we know that as the fundamental attribution error. We're assigning the wrong cause to the effect. We're assigning your behavior to who you are, and we fail to acknowledge the contextual factors.
Absolutely.
But and I'm actually tying this back to Susanna's comment about creating the conditions. If employers were to understand those three psychological nutrients, like you get human flourishing inside the organization. And you know, I do my damnedest to create the environment inside ELI. Probably don't do it perfectly. Like Nick, you can tell me if I don't or do, but we strive to create that environment where you find your place and pursue the things that are meaningful to you, that contribute. And you know, it's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science. What I will say is that the larger the organization, the more complex it gets, right? Because the more individual roles there are and you need certain things filled. And what if you don't have the right people? I guess this is just my empathy for the organizational leaders I work with. I think you're right. And I think it's complex and nuanced.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Wow, I'm seeing that we only have 2 minutes left, so I shudder to think of asking another question that will require 10 minutes of answering. But I guess I would say, do either of you have any closing thoughts on those in the audience who are practitioners of both Eli's work and the EMP, for kind of what can we take from this conversation to go forth and do an even better job being certified practitioners or facilitators of our work?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer that in my half of 2 minutes. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I'm gonna let you go first. That's
No. Yeah, go ahead. Please, no, really, Gary.
I guess all I always say is this. Is the entrepreneurial spirit is the human spirit. It's not in some of us, it's in all of us. And it's our job as leaders to create the conditions for our children, for our students, for our workforce, and in our communities to let that out, to create the conditions. This is entrepreneurial mindset education is about one thing and one thing only. It's about human flourishing.
That says it all. I am so glad I insisted that you go, because we're going to leave it there. That's beautiful, Gary.
Fantastic. Well, for anyone whose question or comment didn't get read out, I'm sorry. Yes, thanks, Clint. I was trying to get to your question, but That's great. Thank you both for such a fulfilling conversation. I feel energized from it. I know many others probably do too. Jen, anything you'd like to let us or the audience know about what you've got cooking now in your work with the EMP, with your coaching, anything like that?
Oh, thank you. So again, Deborah is the one with all the facts, but she shared with me a couple things. First of all, on May 9th, which is just 6 days from now, there's a free Exploring the EMP session.
Mhm.
Deborah, if you haven't already put that in the chat, if you will. And then there's 3 more certifications this year in June, August. Oh, 4 more. June, August, October, and December. Counting
Great.
is really the managerial mindset. So I should have used it right here. I'm so inspired by Gary. I'm all entrepreneurial.
There you go.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you for having me. And Gary, it's such a pleasure. I feel bad for the people watching because they didn't get to have the conversation. So I feel very lucky.
No,
Thank
you
this
for
has been
being here.
lovely.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you both so much. And everyone else, keep an eye out. I'll make sure to include those links that Deborah was popping in the chat as well in the follow-up, just to make sure everyone has them. But being respectful of everyone's time, we are at the end of this presentation. So thank you once again, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone, for
Thank you all.
being here. Hope to speak to all of you again soon.
Thanks, Gary. Let me know when that next book comes out.
Oh,
You got it.
yes.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Deborah. Bye-bye.